So we had a great first day yesterday. We got to hear from General Hawk, commander of U.S. Cyber Command, and we got to hear how far Cybercom has come, and how now we're invested in maturing Cybercom's service-like authorities and what that means for growing our partnerships to set the globe with cybersecurity with our allies and partners. We had a great session, corporate roundtable, which I don't know what you all took away from it. What I took away from it is that partnerships require trust, right? A conference is a good first start, but trust requires building it over time with cadence, repeated contacts, repeated interactions, and I hope that's what we can come away from this conference with. This may be a great first start, or second start, or 12th, over the course of several years, but what trust really requires and partnership really requires is building on this over time repeatedly. And so I'd encourage all of us to do that. We got to hear about the challenge of an evolving sense of what privacy means, both in the U.S. and overseas, and we got to hear from some interesting speakers on that. My quote of the conference is that the DFAR, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, is beautiful. There was a lot else that went on in that panel, but CRADAs may be important, but the DFAR is beautiful. And then we got to hear from the private sector and learn, and this is important. This is what we really want to come away with. What is it that's important for us to know about the perspective of the private sector? Whether we're hearing it from Ms. Starzak at Cloudflare, or we're hearing it from Adam Hickey or Mr. Powell, what are they thinking in times of competition, in times of crisis, and then in times of conflict? And what does that mean for our desire to partner with the private sector, as General Hawk talked about at the very beginning? And then we got to hear some hard things about where the international the international community is going, right? With things like the EU and the GDPR and global competition, what global competition really means for our partnership. And so how the United States, if we want to partner with companies overseas and also with our international partners, how we need to understand where these other regulatory regimes are going. That was yesterday. Today we have a great day. Today we're going to hear about artificial intelligence. We're going to hear about defending critical infrastructure and key resources and partnering to do that. We're going to hear about how we partner to harmonize regulations, and you'll learn about the patchwork of regulations that all of us are facing in cyberspace. And then we get to hear from our international partners and hear their perspective. And then at the end, we're going to hear from the Department of Justice on how they've actually gone about, as partners, disrupting some threats within the United States. But first, we have a special treat. So yesterday, you got to hear from the commander of Cyber Command. Today, I'm pleased, and I'm going to have to put vanity aside and wear my glasses or I'm going to screw this up. So our keynote speaker today is the principal legal advisor to the President on national cybersecurity and strategy, Director Harry Coker. His responsibilities include implementing the U.S. National Cybersecurity Strategy, coordinating cyber defense strategies for federal and critical infrastructure, efforts to deter our adversaries, and private sector engagement on cybersecurity and emerging technology. His 40-year career of public service began when a Navy recruiter approached him at high school in Kansas, right? Think about that. These are the moments that define your lives. Think about the moment that defined yours. Little did he know that that interaction would have an outsized impact on his life, and it would lead to the Naval Academy, to a long career as a surface warfare officer, engineering duty officer in the Navy, from which he retired as commander in 2020. Shortly after retiring from the Navy, Director Coker entered the intelligence community, where he held several senior executive positions, supporting multidisciplinary efforts to fuse cyber offense, cyber defense, open source collection data science, and enterprise information technology. He was awarded the prestigious Don Cryer Award for Diversity Inclusion while serving on CIA's Diversity Inclusion Council, and then came to the NSA, where he served as executive director for the National Security Agency, where again, he distinguished himself as a trailblazer on workforce development, equal employment opportunity, and won leadership awards. In 2023, he was nominated by President Biden to serve as the National Cyber Director, and he assumed office in December. Within a few short months, he's led significant efforts to implement the National Cybersecurity Strategy by consulting with our academic and legal experts to identify legal mechanisms for shifting responsibilities to manufacturers of software and technology, engaging interagency partners to harmonize cyber regulations, and taking steps to build a more robust, diverse, and capable cybersecurity workforce throughout our country. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving National Cyber Director Harry Coker a warm welcome.
Sorry about that introduction, y'all. I asked to just have my name mentioned, but my apologies. Nevertheless, I'm delighted to be here today, and I do appreciate the introduction. Just excited to be here. You all have some challenges, and we're going to lay another one on your plate regarding the power of partnership and defending cyberspace. Before I get too far into it, I also want to thank General Hawk and Cyber Command legal team for setting up such an event, and then want to thank and then acknowledge our two interns, our legal interns with the Office of National Cyber Director, Captain Max Junkins and Yanni. You all ought to keep tabs on them. You talk about growing talent, they're right there getting it done. And I'm sure we'll all benefit from them in the decades to come, so thank you both. And all of you are taking on mighty big challenges, so I look forward to your progress. And as Colonel Hayden said, these symposiums, summits, conferences are nice. It's when the action leads to productivity, not just action, but productivity that needs to follow, that we'll all benefit, so I appreciate that. You mentioned the Naval Academy. Every time I think of my class, I make a point of mentioning that I get more and more proud of the class in 1980, not just from the Naval Academy, but from service academies. First class is with women, and I always reflect on how long it took our great nation to allow women to attend service academies. So, summer of 1976, and the first classes graduated in 1980. It took a long time, but we made the right decision, and our nation is more secure because of that. So I'm grateful for the class of 80 and my classmates there. Gosh, I can't help but acknowledge a quote, "The DFAR is beautiful." I'm sorry I missed that session, but I do have to catch up. But as was mentioned, prior to my most recent retirement, I served as NSA's executive director, and I saw firsthand the power of partnerships, domestic, international, public, and private sector. It was clear then and remains so now that we cannot succeed without partnerships. And I'm delighted that the federal government recognizes that we will not be successful in cybersecurity without our private sector partners. So that's clear. And as was said, it all starts with trust, and that trust has to continue. That's an area of focus for us. Growing up in the military, it was more interaction than partnership. We have progressed from there, and again, we're safer because of that. Today, one of the objectives is to challenge you all to examine the norms of targeting civilian critical infrastructure, and essentially ask you all to work towards providing a commander's intent regarding the importance of refining our understanding of normative and counter-normative activity, especially as it applies to civilian infrastructure. But again, it's all about partnerships, and I reflect back when I was growing up in the Navy. Graduated in 1980. You all may have read about it. The Iran hostage mission, where we had a lot of challenges. You read probably about the invasion in Grenada in 1983, where we did not work as well together within the U.S. Department of Defense. That led to Goldwater-Nichols jointness. It's about partnerships. DOD got it right then. We need to continue to grow from that Goldwater-Nichols and let the service rivalries stay on the athletic fields and not in our defensive or offensive space. So that's where I'll lead in from. I've had the honor of serving as the National Cyber Director for just about 4 months now, and I can tell you that the President's National Cybersecurity Strategy is the North Star, and it has the vital work that we need to overcome the cyber challenges that our nation and the world faces. It promotes democracy, free speech, innovation, and security, and it recognizes that security has evolved from that more traditional definition of national security when I was growing up. It is incorporating economic security, which is key as well. That strategy was created and it is being implemented with a keen understanding that when it comes to cybersecurity, partnership is the key to success. In fact, the word partner or partnership is listed no less than 70 times in that strategy. One of the pillars in that strategy that perhaps requires the most connectivity and collaboration is to work to forge international partnerships to pursue shared goals. You all know there's no boundaries, national boundaries when it comes to cybersecurity, and the connection with our allies is essential, again, to our success. And that's where we're going to focus today. How can we partner together even better to strengthen global cyber norms and ultimately better protect our nation and our allies in this increasingly digital world? And I'm glad that all I had to do was throw out the challenge as opposed to provide answers, because I don't have answers to that. It's a hard one. Reminds me of just last week, we hosted a software liability symposium, and talk about hard challenges. We had the legal community there to get us on a solid legal foundation, which confident we'll be on, but still, it's going to be a tough slog up numerous hills, similar to the task that we're asking you all to take on. So can we actually build norms against developing access to certain systems in civilian critical infrastructure? And that question becomes even more vexing with the acknowledgement that much of our infrastructure is essentially mixed use, i.e. it's not strictly civilian. You could take a look at those 16 critical infrastructure sectors that are listed in PPD 21, which is in the process of being updated, but a number of those 16 cross civilian and military, which makes the challenge even more daunting. Nevertheless, it needs to be taken on. So much of the work to build these norms of responsible state behavior focuses on computer network attacks. And we all know that our adversaries will use compromised systems for espionage on one day and then use it for effects operations the next day. And distinguishing computer network exploitation from preparatory operations for computer network attacks, again, is a hard problem. But I know that's what you all do. That's what I like to do, is take on hard problems. Nevertheless, I am still concerned that this problem is not receiving the attention that it deserves, and that we're not making the progress that our nations deserve. And now it's more relevant than ever. But what if there were a category of civilian-facing systems with no espionage value, where the mere presence of adversary activity could be deemed counter-normative? Would such a norm be feasible? Would it be valuable? Would it be adhered to? These are the questions that we pose to you today. But first, we'll explore why they're so relevant. And as I think most of you all know, that the U.S. intelligence community has reported that our adversaries target our critical infrastructure for destructive attacks. These adversaries are not conducting that targeting based on military necessity or as a result of deliberate targeting processes many of you know so well. Instead, these are opportunistic, developing access. This sort of opportunistic access development based on a target's vulnerability rather than its strategic utility can leave U.S. and allies civilian critical infrastructure networks compromised. They're targeting systems that are not of strategic intelligence value. I get espionage. Nations do that. We do read other gentlemen's mail, as was once said. But the systems that directly impact the communications, energy, or power systems that civilians are using to work, socialize, and increasingly run the operation of their daily lives is something that we have to take a look at. Given the civilian nature of these systems, it's clear that these accesses will be useful only for attackers, perhaps those seeking to break our will by harming civilians who are not participating in conflict or competition. Inflicting societal panic is unacceptable. And in our office, our team does help coordinate the nation's efforts to defend a broad swath of critical infrastructure in partnership with CISA, amongst others. But that range from systematically important financial institutions to small-town rural facilities like mine in Parsons, Kansas. But across such a wide range of entities with significantly varying maturity levels, we recognize that not all critical infrastructure's owners and operators can make the same or sufficient investments in cyber defense. In fact, the National Cybersecurity Strategy does call for a shift in responsibility to defend cyberspace from those that are least capable, the end users, these small rural communities, to those that are most capable, the federal government, high-tech industry, partnerships. But those small communities really are defending against sophisticated actors, nation states, and you talk about an unfair fight, that's where it is. So that's why that major shift is in the strategy, and it does require us and our allies to better define the activities that we cannot tolerate during competition, hopefully prior to conflict. Eyes are wide open. There is always going to be risk. There's always going to be cyber risk. That's why we're here, to manage risk, not to avoid it, but to management. But there are no silver bullets. And just as we do not expect the operators of a grain silo to defend against mortar fire, the agricultural sector network defenders should not be expected to go toe-to-toe with the military cyber unit, especially when those bad actors are opportunistically deploying malware to be used in a future conflict. Defending critical infrastructure means prioritizing our assets and allocating the necessary resources to key systems. And we cannot allow our adversaries to wantonly compromise civilian critical infrastructure. This vulnerability-driven target selection enables so-called counter-value operations aimed at destroying civilian assets to erode political and popular will. We should be clear with our adversaries that vulnerability-driven targeting will not help them secure wartime objectives. Nations that choose to endanger civilians in this way will surrender opportunities to de-escalate or manage conflict. In fact, this is a key point in our focus on deterrence in cyberspace, using every tool that the nation has at its disposal. We know that our adversaries' attacks will not achieve their strategic objectives because we will not sit idly by if we are attacked, nor should we sit idly by while they prepare and pre-position for these attacks. These attackers should study the lessons of counter-value campaigns fought from the skies above Britain in World War II. They should look to the men, the women, the children, and the families who heroically endured, fought back, and helped to win that World War. The lesson was clear. Targeting civilians will only fortify their resolve and will not result in surrender. Now I'd like to turn to two more recent examples of adversary opportunistic counter-value operations. The hacks of Utronics devices by Iran-affiliated cyber groups, and the hack of small-scale critical infrastructure assets by the People's Liberation Army. It was last winter that the Iran-affiliated, opportunistically exploit Utronics programmable logic controllers in the name of sowing panic amongst the U.S. public and the Israeli public. These Utronic devices are typically installed in comparatively target-rich but cyber resource poor assets in the such as the U.S. water sector. Some of these critical infrastructure operators do not have, frankly and sadly, the budget for full-time cyber staff, let alone security specialists. So while communities may not realize that their access to drinking water depends on a device whose password is 1234, our adversaries certainly do. In February of this year, or late January, I joined my colleagues, then Director NSA and Commander of U.S. Cyber Command General Nakasone, FBI Director Wray, and CISA Director Jen Easterly to testify before Congress about the intense interagency work to defend America's critical infrastructure from activity that we believe was conducted by the Chinese PLA. And what was unique about this activity was that it lacked ambiguity. When one develops access to civilian critical infrastructure assets for reasons other than financial gain or espionage, which is the understanding of state secrets, it's clear that the motivation is establishing persistent access for a computer network attack. Such attacks are in alignment with the PLA's doctrine. And as we testified that day, opportunistic exploitation of vulnerabilities in American critical infrastructure to hold non-combatant civilians at risk is unacceptable. Now, I'll conclude today by issuing, again, a challenge or, frankly, a request to this community. The American public has placed incredible trust, so we're asking you all to guide the use of American cyber power. And in advance, I'll thank you all for being thoughtful and responsive on this mission. Also want to thank our ally partners, our private sector partners that are here today. Together, we're not only working to understand the scope of the possible, but also working every day to better understand how we can reconcile the incredible power of cyber with the liberties at the core of our democratically focused lives. So I challenge you all to think of all the ways to strengthen our partnership by promoting responsible norms of conduct. Challenge you to be not only reactive when egregious incidents occur, but also proactive in engaging the broader cyber and legal communities to think through what types of accesses are presumptively for computer network attacks. Policymakers will need to decide what norms to promote and how to effectuate them, but it is this community that can help us understand if there are systems where, because they have no espionage or direct military value, that the presence of adversary cyber activity is enough to be destabilizing and therefore inherently irresponsible. This is a fraught and challenging task. It may be that there's no definition to be had or no line to be drawn that can make it clear what accesses are wholly impermissible. But I can think of fewer, more relevant communities to take on this hard problem than those that you all come from and represent. Cyber norms are not created in a day, and they're certainly not created in a speech. But I do look forward to partnering with you all as we explore this issue of opportunistic targeting, and in doing so, identifying ways in which we can help keep our nation's critical infrastructure secure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Coker. I was I was intrigued by what you said about the administration's work to promote partnerships on cyber norms. Do you have some more examples of the administration's work in this area?
Yes, and I can start with, I think it was 2021. There is a Chinese-based advanced persistent threat that's known by Hafnium. I think it's also called Silk Typhoon. But they exploited Microsoft's servers. And part of the international partnership in going against that norm was, number one, publicly attributing that attack to that entity, publicly acknowledging its affiliation with that government, and then our partners, to include the United Kingdom, came out and joined in that attribution. Some people call it name and shame. It's more than that. It's making not just the public aware, but our international partners aware that that type of behavior is ongoing and should not be tolerated. And that reminds me of a former colleague who said that Russia wants to destroy us and China wants to own us. And that guides me every day. I believe in it. And going down a trail of key quotes that guide me, Maya Angelou said that if a person shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I'm a bit more forgiving than that. But if an entity shows us who they are, we ought to believe it. And we've been shown time and time again by our competitors who they are. A challenge is to ensure that the American public and our international public recognizes what's going on that front and that we work to do something about it. That does not mean I'm against diplomacy or trying to work together on these norms. But again, the last quote I'll throw out is President Reagan, trust but verify. We have had sessions with China on cyber norms. At least in September 2015, I can recall one based on the constant theft of intellectual property. Those agreements were had at the highest levels of our governments. But I don't know that they worked out as well as we hoped. Again, not going to give up on that, but we need to persist. And another one on the international partnerships, indigenous telecommunications equipment, making that threat known amongst our partners, because it was not just the United States that made our partners aware of the threats and connectivity of indigenous telecommunications system. And our key partners recognized that and took action. So those are just a couple of examples of the international norms.
Those are great. Can you speak? Do you mind speaking to us about a set of the broader partnerships that ONCD is interested in pursuing, and how the partnerships that your office is pursuing kind of fit into our evolving cybersecurity strategy, or the cybersecurity strategy and the evolving cybersecurity posture of America?
Yes. I mentioned one of the shifts, the two major shifts in the national cybersecurity strategy. That first one, again, is shifting responsibility from those that are least capable to defend cyberspace to those that are most capable. The second major shift in the national cybersecurity strategy is to incentivize long-term investment in cybersecurity. And what that means is, as opposed to being first to market, we need to have capabilities that are secure to market, secure when they get there. So many of the vulnerabilities that exist in cybersecurity are there because of legacy products that are not sufficiently maintained. So we are working in partnership with software creators to try to get them to adhere to that philosophy. Frankly, it's good for all of us. We've encountered private sector partners who also want their supply chain secure. So it's not a public sector versus private sector. It's a partnership, and there's going to be give and take. I mentioned that software liability symposium. We're going to work with our private sector partners to find the right touch on how to do that. So partnerships are key. And I'll add, I touched on sector risk management agencies, those U.S. government entities that are responsible for working with the critical sector owners and operators, most of whom are private sector. But that has to be a partnership, guiding each other on how to best to secure these 16 critical infrastructure sectors. And the other part of the partnership that really concerns me is our state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, the SLTTs. Those are, again, in many cases, these small, under-resourced entities that are going up every day against nation-state actors. It's an unfair fight, and we have to do a better job at being good partners with those SLTTs.
I would be remiss if I didn't take advantage of the fact that that we have you here. You've had a fascinating career in your own right. We've got as many as 250, mostly lawyers, some cybersecurity professionals, some policy professionals in the audience, and then of course we have possibly several hundred to 1,000 online. Everything from students in school and classrooms to other interested parties. Do you have some thoughts from your own background, your own perspective, and then your work at the White House in developing a cyber-talented workforce on what we can do to broaden and better prepare ourselves to serve the cybersecurity needs of our nation, our nations in the future?
Yeah, I do, and thank you for that. Just a few data points. Last Thursday, I was at the United States Military Academy at West Point, participating in the Joint Service Academy Cyber Summit. So that education, getting to those cadets, was important. So we're there for that. Today, I'm glad to be here, taking in some of what you all are teaching. And then tomorrow morning, I'll be at NDU with the Pinnacle class, the 3 stars. I use that just to show from cadets to this mid-level, to senior level, into the most senior folks in our Department of Defense, all discussing cyber. It's a never-ending journey. So it continues. I know you're retiring soon, but I hope you keep your pulse on cyber and continue to help us out. You make reference to the National Cyber Workforce Education Strategy. The pillars in there include the need to inject cybersecurity in the American education system. I don't know that we can start too early on that. So inject it early, and that means not just doing a curriculum review, but also helping the educators. You can't teach what you don't know. And then we talk about the continuing educational process, but another key component of that workforce education strategy is to take a look at requirements for positions. Do we really need to have a 4-year degree requirement for cybersecurity professionals? That's a rhetorical question. I'm going to answer it. No, we don't. And you know, I thought we were making progress by having a requirement removed for federal contractors on U.S. government contracts. It wasn't a requirement. It was a worst practice. It was not a requirement. So we became aware of that and worked with our partners at OPM and OMB and are educating acquisition professionals that is not a requirement. In that beautiful DFARS, it's not. Some people have made it a requirement in their agency or department contracts. It's not a requirement for us. So we need to do that. And the last thing I'll point out on this front, impacting the education curriculums. I actually had a conversation with General Hawk last week at West Point about how we might be able to partner with accreditation bodies to ensure that we're getting the right touch of cybersecurity curriculum in the academic community. NSA, DHS, sponsor a great program, Center for Academic Excellence, where they do go in and help colleges and universities shape their cybersecurity-related curriculum to best teach, this important field.
Coker, I can't thank you enough for taking your valuable time to come out of your position with the many responsibilities you have and coming down and sharing your thoughts with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Director Coker for speaking to us this morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, for our in-person attendees, I am very happy to report that we have tea available for you. And to our virtual audience and everyone else, we are on break till 09:45. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Colonel Raul Rodriguez Medellin, Director of U.S. Cyber Command Office of Academic Engagements. In 2022, we launched the Command's Academic Engagement Strategy in order to deepen our partnerships with academia. Cyber Command established the Academic Engagement Network, also known as the AEN, which is a team effort across the DoD Cyber Mission Force and academia. Our Cyber Force members include the Command Headquarters, the Cyber National Mission Force, the Joint Forces Headquarters, DODIN, and the Service Cyber Components. The response from our nation's educational institutions has been amazing. In the past 2 years, the AEN has grown to include 121 institutions from 37 states and the District of Columbia. AEN members include 9 federal institutions, including Service War Colleges, the Naval Postgraduate School, and 4 of the service academies. Additionally, our 108 non-federal institution members include 15 institutions serving underrepresented communities. Cyber Command's Academic Engagement Program has 4 strategic goals. First, engage the future workforce by inspiring a diverse group of students to pursue cyber education careers, both in the military and as civilians. Second, increase cyber-applied research and innovation by encouraging research on our hardest problems. We are hosting another cyber recon effort this year, which involves student researchers mentored by Cyber Command staff. The Capstone Symposium will be held at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland in mid-April of this year. Third, expand cyber-focused analytical partnerships by providing insight into adversary cyberspace strategies, organizations, and capabilities. Fourth, enrich strategic cyber dialogue. By engaging faculty, we challenge Cyber Command's concepts and refine command strategies, as well as align our senior leader engagements with our academic partners. As we enhance our academic partnerships, the legal profession is a critical aspect to this maturing relationship that will allow us to increase intellectual rigor as we advance the nation's cyber warfare capabilities. To find out more, check out the AEN at cybercom.mil.
Greetings from U.S. Fleet Cyber Command. My name is Lieutenant Commander David Lane, and I'm here to provide a brief overview of our command and what we do. Fleet Cyber Command has responsibilities touching almost all aspects of the information domain. We break these responsibilities into 4 overarching hats that our commander wears. First, as U.S. Fleet Cyber Command, we're the Navy's service component to U.S. Cybercom and service cryptologic component to NSA CSS. Wearing this hat, we plan, coordinate, integrate, synchronize, direct, and conduct full-spectrum cyberspace operational activities required to ensure freedom of action across all of the Navy's warfighting domains in and through cyberspace. We also serve as the Navy's authorizing official responsible for the oversight of the DoD Risk Management Framework, ensuring that the Navy's information systems have implemented assigned cybersecurity controls, identified risks, and implemented safeguards from design through fielding. Our U.S. 10th Fleet hat is our operational element and executes our mission through a task force structure similar to that used by other fleet commanders. This includes ensuring command and control capabilities, as well as deliverance of defensive cyber and space operations. In our 10th Fleet hat, we also operationalize our cryptologic and SIGINT missions. As NavSpace, we're the Navy Service Component Commander to U.S. Space Command and offer centralized coordination of Navy space activities and promote better integration of space and maritime tasks, ensuring maritime superiority from the seafloor to space. Finally, as Joint Force Headquarters Cyber Navy, we are subordinate headquarters to U.S. Cybercom, tasked with providing support to U.S. Indo-PACOM, U.S. Forces Korea, and U.S. Southcom. Through this hat, we exercise operational control over joint cyber mission forces and provide planning and integration support through our cyberspace operations integrated planning elements. Our domain, particularly in our 10th Fleet hat, is widespread and includes the Navy's Information Operations Commands, or NIOCs, and various task groups assigned specific functional or geographic missions. We also provide cyberspace operations integrated planning elements embedded at the geographic combatant commands we support. These elements fully integrate cyberspace operations into operational plans, ensuring timing and tempo are set by the commanders for use of cyber effects in the field. Our focus day in and day out comes down to 3 operational objectives: ensure C2, provide maritime and space domain awareness, and deliver cyber and space effects. We do this through 5 command priorities: warfighting, readiness, innovation, integration, and partners and allies. These priorities enable us to execute our mission and provide cyber and space capabilities around the globe in support of combatant command and national priorities.